I made these from leftover acrylic paint and I'm going to show you how. So my husband had just finished his acrylic paint pour design for a resin trinket tray, and these are the containers that he used. So I was looking at them and I thought, maybe I could try something. I was inspired. So I just began scraping out the remaining paint from the containers. It was not a lot, but I was gonna try and see what I can do with it. At this point, I did not know exactly what I was doing. I've never done anything like this before, but in watching him make that piece of art and being inspired by him, I just figured that, if this came out even looking remotely close to what he did, then I would be happy. I eventually realized that it may be best to just use my fingers since the spoon was not getting out much at all because not much was in the container to begin with. After getting as much of the paint out of the little containers as I possibly could, I started to blow around with the straw because that is what I saw him do. But then I realized enough paint wasn't there, so I decided to add some white. Then I continued to use the straw to blow around the paints. So I realized that I liked the texture that the straw created, but it was not mixing quite as much as I'd like. So I took the little stir stick there and I mixed. And then I started to use the straw again because I did like the finish, the texture of the straw to be as a finish. So I continued to do that for a while. I added white as needed and then mixed and blew. After several hours, the paint was now dry on the mat, and my intention was to lift it and cut it into different shapes and put it into silicone mold and pour resin over it. But then it was too thin. I realized that it was difficult to peel off the silicone mat, so I had to come up with a different idea. I remembered that we had some open bezels, so I decided to take some of those to use them. Before I started, I decided to test to see if what I had in mind would actually work. The plan is to put the bezel on the paint, add UV resin inside the bezel, cure it, and hopefully the paint attaches to the UV resin and then form a beautiful pendant. So I decided to test it out first to make sure that the paint would attach to the UV resin. So I did not cure this for long, and I see where the paint is attaching to the UV resin, so I felt confident to go ahead with the plan. So I went ahead and I decided to start with my favorite of all the bezels, this black heart. And I am using a low viscosity resin. It's very thin, that's how I know that it's low. I have other UV resins, but this was the easiest one for me to pull out. So I decided to just go ahead and use it. Maybe a thicker one would have been better. Alright, so after curing that, I tested the top and voila, it did not cure all the way through. So I decided to go ahead and cure what was left on the mat. And the good thing is that the paint did peel off with the UV resin that was cured on top of it. So I was still confident that this little experiment, if you will work if I allow the resin to cure properly before lifting it off the paint. So I pushed the bezels a little bit down in the paint to kind of seal the bottom so that the UV resin would not seep underneath it. This was no less than 10 minutes of UV resin later, and I tried to lift it and it still wasn't cured. So I tried with that one, and then I tried with this other one on the other side. But the paint was still not sticking to the UV resin. So I decided to leave it be and do a few more UV sessions. I honestly was a little nervous to peel it off, but I decided that it's either it worked or it didn't work, so I was ready to move on to the next stage. And it did work. It did attach to it, but it was peeling paint that was around it as well, so I had to get those cleaned up. So after that, I decided to use a cutting mat to just cut around the edges and trim them up as neatly as I could. And it was quite easy to do. Some of the UV resin had seeped out underneath some of the bezels, but it was for the most part easy to do. It's just one piece, that big piece there, that was a bit difficult for me to cut off, but I decided to just move on to the next stage with the parts that I was unable to take off. So this next stage is just me backing the paint with some UV resin. So basically just putting some UV resin on the back of the pendants behind the acrylic paint so that it can be sealed in properly. And I just want to say, these are so pretty. The colors on the back are so vibrant. They look so much brighter than the colors on the front. Even though I love the pattern, the designs on the front, these colors on the back are so vibrant and rich and just so pretty. And so these pendants can be worn both ways, front and back. So after sealing the back, I decided to just fill up the front of the bezels to bring it to the top of it so that the pendant can be thick and give the art work inside just enough gloss and enough shine. And this one here is my favorite. And this is a few of the pieces on chains just to show you what they look like finished. The front and the back view are both just stunning. Yeah, happy with this session, happy with how everything turned out. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to follow our journey. I hope you have a wonderful day as well as a restful night. Bye.